Welcome to this demonstration of Blueprint Migrate, where we show migrating Blue Prism automations to Microsoft Power Automate Desktop. Traditionally, when a company wanted to switch RPA vendors, they had to manually rewrite all of their automations. It's basically the same as when they were first written, except instead of working from a PDD, you're working from an example bot. But in both cases, you're writing all the code. Blueprint lets you do an automated RPA migration. In this case, you start with most of the new code already written. That is your starting point. The developer then finishes the rest of the coding and does testing. A Blueprint automated migration typically reduces between 60 to 70% of the overall work. For this demonstration, I have 8 fairly large automations. We've already analyzed them using Blueprint's Migration Analysis and Planning product, or MAP. I encourage you to go watch the video demonstration for that product. In this video, we're going to focus on one of the 8 automations, the one called RTS, which would be considered a fairly large and complex automation. From our MAP analysis, Blueprint converts 99% of the code. This is a typical conversion rate for Blueprint in the high 90s. The remaining work for the developer will be to fix compiler errors, 15 of them across 7 actions, to complete 25 to-do items, mostly the few lines of code that Blueprint could not convert. And then when testing, there's probably some selectors that are not going to work and need to be respied. So think of this as Blueprint writing over 7,700 lines of code instead of the developer having to do it. So Blueprint's map product lets us know all this and more for all of the automations, not just this one. But let's jump into the migration product and see how it works. Here we are in Blueprint. As I said, everything's already been imported. And here is the RTS automation with all of its details. I've also set up some conversion rules. Specifically in the Reuse tab, this is where I set up rules to map VBO actions to distinct pad flows that implement those actions. In this way, all of the flows can now reuse these common actions, just like the VBO was being reused back in Blue Prism. And over here in the Environment Variables tab are some of the variables that Blueprint found my Blue Prism process was using. I'd like these to map to solution environment variables in PAD, where they get passed into the desktop flow when launched. As mentioned, all this information's already been imported to Blueprint. The way that we imported it was literally to select your project and go import from Blue Prism, and then you pick one or more BP release files. Hit continue, and Blueprint parses that file and gives you a preview of its contents. Because we're importing from Blue Prism, of course, it's separated into processes versus objects. But you can see all the pages of the processes, you can see the different VBOs being used, and the actions within them. The standard actions, of course, are going to map to native PAD actions, so we don't need to import their content to Blueprint, whereas the custom ones, we do need to import their content. Blueprint is smart enough to detect this and to auto-select which ones are needed to be imported. You, of course, can override any of these choices before you hit the import button. Now, once they are in the Blueprint product, you can view the individual process pages and object actions, which Blueprint shows graphically. And for each individual step over here on the right-hand side, you can see the details of each stage from the legacy platform. And you can also see how Blueprint converts that to Blueprint's Common Object Model, or COM, which facilitates our migration. However, when you are ready to export this over to Power Automate Desktop, you simply pick Export. Now, Blueprint has a rules wizard that will guide me through the steps of setting up rules, but as you saw, I've already configured mine, so I'm going to bypass the wizard. Here I see a summary of how many and which type of rules are going to be applied. I showed you I have reuse rules and environment variable rules. I hit continue, and the last step is Blueprint gives me a preview of what is going to be exported. This is what we call a call tree or a dependency tree, starting with the main and then cascading down all of the pages and actions that are being called. So that's all going to be pulled into the Power Automate desktop flow that's about to be created automatically. Hitting continue, Blueprint creates a job to do that export. I can just click to go monitor that job's progress, and when it's complete, we can open it up over in Power Automate Desktop. Here in Power Automate Desktop, I've previously migrated over the actions from any VBO that I would like to be reused across multiple flows. And when Blueprint exports VBO actions as their own flow, it will tag them with the name of the VBO. Why that's important is if I scatter those around, at any point I can just click Filter, VBO, and any VBO, I can see in its entirety, like a package, all the actions within it. So that's a convenient way how we can accomplish the same approach to VBOs, but in Power Automate Desktop. I'll just clear that and sort by time. I will refresh because we just finished that export. And here is my newly exported automation. Let's open it up and we can see what came across. So as you can see, all of the logic, the actions, all the exceptions, the structure of this automation in the form of all the subflows have been converted by Blueprint. We can see all of the variables, and that includes some input variables. You recall I flipped that switch so that our environment variables would become inputs so that we could leverage the Power Platform solution environment variables. The other thing that came over was all of the selectors. UI Desktop and any web browser selectors are all converted by Blueprint. As mentioned, there's going to be a few compiler errors to fix, and that list, as always, is down the bottom. And if you just search to do at the top, you will literally get that to-do list for the developer. And when you're fixing things, Blueprint adds info comments to give you additional guidance information on how to fix things. So throughout the code, Blueprint is adding information to help the developer finish it off. Even, for example, in this case, you can see Blueprint has a reference to a more extensive online help article to provide even more information on how to fix things. And if you recall the reuse rules we set up to have any use of those VBO actions to call that external flow. Calling an external flow is a run desktop flow action. So I can see down here, I'll just pick one, that it has indeed been resolved. So here is a place where automatically we're calling this external flow called attach open text, which, if you remember, was one of our VBO actions. So fix that small number of compiler errors, to-dos, and respy some percentage of those selectors that you discover in testing were not working properly, instead of rewriting over 7,700 lines of code. That's the value that Blueprint provides. These are the features that we showed you today, grouped by featured category, but there's a lot more in Blueprint's Migrate product, so I encourage you to see our other videos or to reach out to us for more information at info@blueprintsys.com. Thank you for watching.